Meanwhile, the war on ISIS is a very high on the priority list for the president-elect, which could explain why he's sort of widened the selection pool for Secretary of State, maybe for Defense Secretary as well. General David Petraeus, for example, the latest name to be added to maybe Secretary of State list as well, not just Defense Secretary. It comes at a time we just saw Bob Corker, the man who heads up the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, hop in an elevator on his way up to meet the president-elect. We've got reaction to all of these fast developments with General Anthony Zinnin, who joins us, a former commander of the Middle East during the Iraq War. General, always good to have you. Thanks for coming by.
Good to be with you, Neil.
Do you think, General, it is important, because I get extreme reactions, some who don't like the presence of a military figure in a cabinet post, and others who do. What is the benefit of having a general in a cabinet or in a position like this?
Well, I think in times of conflict, the military experience and expertise would be valuable. Men like George Marshall obviously was a great contributor to strategic development, planning, policy. In times of peace, maybe not so much. I think when you're talking Secretary of State or even Secretary of Defense, there are other dimensions beyond the military or skill sets that individual needs. Obviously, you need to understand the art of diplomacy, how relationships are built. You need to understand economics and how alliance building. You know, George Marshall's greatest contribution, and the one he won the Nobel Prize for, was the Marshall Plan. That really wasn't militarily related.
Yeah.
But so obviously, there's a time when that may be more valuable than others.
What about now with General Petraeus, General, in that, you know, he faced a misdemeanor charge on sloppy handling of classified data, sharing it with a mistress, and that supposedly eliminated him from any job high up in government, let alone Secretary of State. Obviously, Donald Trump feels otherwise. Do you?
Well, I think that obviously that's going to be the president-elect's choice, how much that plays into the decision. I think we certainly know General Petraeus' qualities. He was an excellent military leader, obviously was in the CIA, and while he was there, did an excellent job. So he brings a lot of talent into a position like that.
Now, I guess what I'm saying, and this is outside your sphere because you very nicely avoid political arguments here, but the irony would be that the president-elect would turn to someone who was kind of compared to what Hillary Clinton was doing, and he yet might still, you know, put pressure on her as a president of the United States. Do you think that it would be wise then for Donald Trump to look elsewhere, just to stave off talk that, oh yeah, you're fine when it comes to someone who could join your team, not fine when it concerns the woman you beat for president of the United States?
Well, you know, first of all, let's look at our issues with ISIS. It's probably the biggest national security issue we have on the table. There's two parts of this. One is defeating ISIS. That's the Secretary of Defense. That's the military's responsibility. The second part is what comes afterwards, and then what. And that's going to take a lot of skill, a lot of credibility, a lot of diplomacy to reconstruct Syria, Iraq, deal with people in the region, Russia, the United Nations, NATO. And you don't want to be distracted from all that, and you certainly want to have the skills necessary in that area. So I think that's what needs to come into consideration for Mr. Trump.
You know, earlier on, you might have heard, General, that we are not sending an official delegation, that is the president or the vice president, to Fidel Castro's funeral. Now, I don't know whether that means lower-ranking American diplomats could still attend. We're told that they can attend on their own as private citizens. I don't know what the deal is. But I do know that the former president of Mexico, Vicente Fox, was speaking on our earlier today, comparing Donald Trump with Fidel Castro. I wonder if you would react to this.
That kind of dictatorship, that kind of authoritarian leaders is very similar to Trump. They lie, they cheat, they are false prophets, they promise many things that they are not going to be able to comply. So we need
comparing Donald Trump to Fidel Castro is beyond the pale. Fidel Castro was a murdering thug who tortured people, who imprisoned people, and quite frankly, Mr. President, I ask you to take that back, comparing Fidel Castro to Donald Trump.
No, I don't take it back.
All right, so he didn't take that back with Ardega McDowell, but General, what do you make of that? That he's not the only one who says stuff like this, and I'm just wondering how you think that what our response should be.
I don't think we should send anybody to his funeral. I mean, it's over. He was a disaster for his country. He nearly brought us to a conflict that would have been unimaginable, and I think we ought to move on from there. In no way should we try to memorialize him in any way or recognize him in any way.
But for the former president, Vicente Fox, to compare Donald Trump to Castro, I don't know how people feel about Donald Trump, but I think even that's a bit of a stretch. Don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, yeah, there is no comparison. I mean, we're talking about a dictator that committed the worst kinds of atrocities, and you know, someone who is just about to embark on the presidency and needs an opportunity to demonstrate his ideas and what he thinks is best for this country. A former president should not weigh in on this. This is the United States' business.
You know, General, real quick, I know you've got to go, but we spend close to $600 billion a year on defense. Donald Trump has said we have to spend more and really stand by our military, beef up our Navy, take the fight to ISIS. All that could be very, very expensive. But in a budget of that size, how would you go about it? Do you think that we do need to spend much more than we are now? Because these levels are at or near, at least, Afghan-Iraq war highs. What do you make of that?
Well, the first thing you do is look at your interests and your threats around the world. You know, that determines what kind of military you need and you feel comfortable with. Then you look at the kind of military that you can afford, and then the subtraction leads you to where you're willing to take the risk. So it isn't a matter of looking directly at the budget and the money. Look at what kind of military we need. If you can't afford the one we would prefer to have, then you make some hard, cold decisions on where you'll accept risk.
General, a real pleasure and honor having you. Thank you very, very much.
Good to be with you, Neil.